Graphing quadratics. Anytime you have an equation that has an x squared in it, you will graph something called a parabola. A parabola is a U-shaped graph that opens up or opens down. There is something called an axis of symmetry that cuts the graph in half, and it crosses it through something called the vertex. The vertex is the only point on the graph that there is just one. Otherwise, each point on the graph has a mirror image point on the other side. If the parabola opens up, the vertex is at the bottom, therefore the vertex is the minimum value. If the parabola opens down, then the vertex is at the top and it's a maximum value. I also know that if my A is positive, the graph will open upwards, and if my A is negative, the graph will open downwards. So let's talk about the steps that Mr. Bailey taught you about graphing a parabola. I'm going to give you a different example than the one he gave you, and then we'll go back to the one he gave you. So there's a problem in the book. It's not shown how to do it. It says y equals x squared plus 2x plus 18. Right now this is in standard form because it's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So his first step says to identify a, b, and c. So if you look at this problem, you should be able to tell me that the a is 1, because there's really a 1 there. Your b is 2, and your c is 18. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is to find your x value of your vertex. In order to do that, he says take the opposite of b and divide it by 2 times a. So our b is 2, so we change it to a negative 2, and that's the numerator, divided by 2 times a is 1. So the top is negative 2, and the bottom is positive 2, and negative 2 divided by positive 2 is negative 1. He says now to graph the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is this vertical line that goes up and down through the graph. So on my graph paper, I'm going to, on the x-axis, go to negative 1, and I'm just going to put a dashed vertical line going through it. That's going to cut my parabola in half. So step 4 is to make a table of values. So since you know one of your values is negative 1, you're going to make a table. And since you got negative 1, you will start with that. And then you pick 2 more values. So maybe you want to pick 0 and 1, because those are 2 values to the right of your axis of symmetry. So you'll plug negative 1 in for your x's. And so that's 1 minus 2 plus 18. And so that should be 17. And do the same for 0. I get 18. And do 1. That's 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 18 is 21. So now on your graph paper, and I'm not going to have enough room on this graph paper, so you would go at -1, you would go up to 17. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't have enough room. So this is a bad example. But you would graph those 3 points. So because I used a bad example that the book gave, I'm going to go back to the example that Mr. Bailey gave. So I'm going to put his problem side by side. So his problem was y equals -2x squared minus 8x minus 2. So you should have that one in your notes. So I'm going to go back through the steps again. You find A, B, and C. And I have to tell you, when you find A, B, and C, you have to make sure that it is in standard form first, because I noticed on the 8 problems you have to do for homework, there's at least one that's not in standard form, so it has to look like this. And identify your A as -2, your B as -8, and your C as -2. Okay? So that's step 1. Step 2 is to find your equation for the axis of symmetry. So you use the equation he gave you, x equals -b over 2a. So again, that -b doesn't automatically mean that b is negative. It really means just take the opposite of b. Since your b is already -8, the opposite of -8 is +8. So that's what goes on top. Maybe he would even, I don't know, I can look in the notes, maybe he would write it minus -8 and then change 2 negatives to a positive. It looks like that's how he did it. And then in the bottom, you have 2 times a, 2 times -2. So on the top, we have a +8, and 2 times -2 is -4. So 8 divided by -4 is -2. So your axis of symmetry is x equals -2. So on the graph paper, again, on the x-axis, you go to -2, and then you put your vertical dashed line, your axis of symmetry. And that's going to cut your graph in half. And now we're going to make a table. So I'm going to come back here, and similarly to the one that I had made for some problem that you don't have in your notes, that I didn't have room on my graph paper, I'm going to make the table that's in your notes. So you have x, you have the equation -2x squared minus 8x minus 2, and you have y. And so the x that you got, -2, that's first, and then you want to pick 2 more values, either 2 to the right of -2 or 2 to the left. So I like to pick the 2 that are to the right because they're going towards positive. So I pick -1 and 0. Now be very careful, like when you put this in, -2 times -2 squared, if you're not using a calculator, you have to do order of operations, which says do your exponents first, and then you multiply by this number on the outside. Then -8 times -2 minus 2. So again, I'm not using a calculator, and then you can check this with what's in your notes. -2 squared is a +4 times -2 is a -8. -8 times -2 is a +16, and then bring down the -2. So I know -8 plus 16 is 8, minus 2 is 6, and that's what you should have in your notes. Do the same with the -1. -2 times -1 squared minus 8 times -1 minus 2. So -1 squared is +1 times -2 is a -2. -8 times -1 is a +8, and then bring down that -2. So -2 plus 8 is 6, and 6 minus 2 is 4. And I see that's what's in the notes. And do the same with the 0. So 0 squared is 0, and 0 times -2 is 0. -8 times 0 is 0. And bring down the -2. And 0 plus 0 is 0, minus 2 is -2. And so this is the table you have in your notes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and graph those 3 points. So from the table, I'm going to graph -2, 6. So remember, go over to -2 and then up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to graph -1, 4. So go to -1 and up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 0, -2. So this point that I had is not a point. That's the axis of symmetry. And so now what happens is, this is the vertex, and I see as I go to the right, it's going down. So you try to make your U going down and put an arrow. And so what I told you earlier was that this has two halves that are mirror images. So you went over 1 and down 2 on the right. So now I want you to do the same thing from this vertex point, over 1, down 2. You're just going to draw it so that they match, that they're equal distance from the axis of symmetry. And then there's another point down here. It's 2 over from the axis of symmetry, so you want this one 2 over as well. And then you can connect this side. And that's your parabola, although maybe yours will look a little neater than mine. So that is from your table, that's your negative b over 2a plus the two friends. So we plotted this one, and then the table gave me these two, and then it says graph those 3 points, and then they're evil twins, so these ones across are the evil twins. Okay, so now this parabola opens down, you can see that, and if I look at that original equation, a was negative, so I know that. The vertex is at the very, very top of the graph, so this top is the highest point, so that means that is the maximum value at the vertex, because it's at the top. Alright, so I don't know if that helps, but I'm going to we'll go through one more together. So let's look at number 22. So if you get it, you can go ahead and start. You can always pause this video and then come back and then check when you get to 22 if you did it right. So number 22, which is one of your 8 for tonight's homework, is y equals 3x squared minus 6x plus 4. So he says to find a, b, and c. What you need to make sure is that it's in standard form, that it's in ax squared plus bx plus c. So x squared x and then just a number, no variable. So it is. So my a is 3 and my b is negative 6. So if there's a minus, make sure you take it with, and c is 4. So I identified a, b, and c. Now we find the axis of symmetry, which is x equals negative b over 2a. And remember, just because it says negative b doesn't mean it has to be a negative number. Your b was already negative. What negative b means, do the opposite. So you could do, like I think Mr. Bailey showed, opposite of negative 6. You can do it like that and then change them both, or just say to yourself, I know the opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. On the bottom we have 2 times a, that's 2 times 3, that's 6. And 6 divided by 6 is 1, so the axis of symmetry is x equals 1. So then I'm going to use this other graph that I never got to graph because I didn't have points on it. So I'm going to go to the x-axis, and at positive 1, just go ahead and put this dashed vertical line. That's my axis of symmetry that I'm going to graph on either side of. So now we're going to make a table, and again, when you make your table, you have your x values, which you start with what you got, and then pick 2 more, and I just always go to the right. So I start with 1, and then 2, then 3. Then the equation is 3x squared minus 6x plus 4, and then your solution. So again, be very careful. It's 3 parentheses 1 parentheses squared minus 6 parentheses 1 plus 4. 1 squared is 1. You do exponents first and then multiply. 3 times 1 is 3. This is really negative 6 times 1, which is negative 6 plus 4. 3 minus 6 is negative 3 plus 4 is 1. Do the same thing with the 2. Put it inside where the x goes. Just evaluate. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12 plus 4. These two cancel each other out. 12 minus 12 is 0 plus 4 is 4. The last one. 3 times 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 4. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18 plus 4. So 27 minus 18 is 9. 9 plus 4 is 13. So when I graph it, I'm going to graph the value 1, 1. I'm going to graph the value 2, 4.